Hi, I'm Mike McLean. Welcome to the Short Circuit podcast brought to you by Swift Aircraft. In this series, we'll be chatting with a variety of people from all walks of life, but who all have one thing in common: aviation. We'll discuss how and why they got into aviation, what or who inspired them, and what they would say to encourage young people to get involved. Flight fascinates many of us, and our guests will explain why they are compelled to look to the sky. Today's chat is with Paul Eden. Paul is a man of words rather than numbers or pictures, and operates in a part of aviation that the majority of us rarely get to see, let alone experience. He will give us a bit of an insight into this more specialised part of the aviation sector, and will explain how there are still wide and varied career opportunities for people of all skills. I'll let Paul describe his niche in his own words, but before we start, I have a request. Please remember to click the like button, share with friends and colleagues, and subscribe. This really does help us get the word out. So, with that in mind, here goes. Good afternoon, Paul Eden. Welcome to the Short Circuit podcast. And in time-honoured fashion, we're going to start with question one, and that is, who are you and what is your current role in aviation?
Well, for starters, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I am, as you said, Paul Eden. I would describe myself as an aviation writer, never a journalist. I think journalism implies a level of qualification that I don't have. So I kind of ask aviation people cool stuff and write it down. Hence, I'm a writer. And I came here almost by accident. I think I can admit this at this, I've been doing this 20 odd years now. I can admit I responded to an advertisement in a magazine. I think it's probably Aircraft Illustrated. Someone wanted an editor and writer for one of those card series that you used to collect sort of 20 years ago, buy 12 cards a month kind of thing, put them all together. So I applied, went and had an interview. They said, can you tell us what these planes are? Show me lots of pictures. Like, yeah, know what all those are. They said, can you use a computer? This was 1996. I lied and said yes. Got the job. First day in the office, sat me down behind a Mac. After about 3 hours, someone said, you don't know how to turn it on, do you? And I was like, well, no, actually, you got me there. I don't. So I had 3 or 4 hours of Mac training, and away I went. That was me, aviation writer. And here I am now, still doing it.
Okay, so when you say writer, so what media do you publish in? I mean, are you online or hard copy or?
Yeah, so lots of magazines which also have either an online or a digital element to them as well, in parallel. A few paper-only magazines, I guess. Still, a lot of it is business-to-business stuff, but also some of the popular magazines as well. Then I edit and write 4 times a year Business Aviation magazine. Occasionally, I'll write a book or edit a book, do that kind of thing. Lots of blogging, bit of podcasting, and also now every now and again some marketing literature for people as well. So a little bit of everything really right across aviation.
Right. Okay. So you said there when they asked you, they showed you pictures of planes and stuff and you were able to identify them and so on. That was back in the day. So obviously you had some interest in aviation beforehand. So what started you off? What got you looking upwards?
So the story goes, when I was 4, I went to Father Christmas, Santa Claus, who in my opinion at the time was the true Father Christmas, in a local department store. He gave me a Spitfire kit. It was a Matchbox 1/72nd scale Spitfire. I think it was a Mark 9, but I can't tell you that for sure. Grandad took the kit for me. He built it and painted it. I got it back just before Christmas. I was absolutely fascinated. So the Ladybird book of aircraft, the one with Concorde on the cover, appeared under the tree that Christmas day. And that was it. That was me addicted. Then I found out that Grandad had been in the RAF, so he had lots of stories and photos, and it literally snowballed from there. And I was born in and grew up in East Anglia through the 70s and 80s. So there was aviation everywhere.
Right.
It was inevitable almost.
So what was your nearest base then when you were growing up as a kid?
It would have been Marham. But having said that, Coningsby, Lakenheath, Alconbury, Milton Hall were all fairly close as well. So, growing up, I saw Canberras and Tornadoes, Phantoms, Starfighters, Hercules, SR-71s. all of these things were quite regular.
Right, okay. That was school age and upwards. So how did you get into writing, and did you start by writing about aviation, or did what else were you doing before then?
So I was at university in Edinburgh. I was there with my wife to be. I was studying geology, funnily enough. And we both got to the end of our courses. We got jobs locally, and we said, hey, whoever gets a real job first, that's where we'll move to, and then the other will try and get something. And as it was, this advert popped up in the magazine, and I applied. I'd written a few essays. I'd written nothing properly about aviation.
Mhm.
Um, they just saw some of the writing, must have thought there's some potential there. And then I've taken no shame in seeing people who can do the job really well and saying to them, how do you do that? How can I do this better? Why have you changed that? How can I reflect that and do it better the next time and constantly improve? Still do it all the time. I don't believe any writer has ever written anything that a good editor can't improve.
Right, okay. Uh, Other writers, please send in your comments.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah.
So, right, so you studied in Edinburgh,
Yeah.
but I take it you've now moved back down south, or
Yes,
yeah,
yes, we're
okay,
back. Not very far actually from where I grew up. We're back in East Anglia. Yeah.
okay, fine, fine. So you're still getting your regular fix of aviation, because not a great deal of flying around in central belt of Scotland, apart from a couple of airports, and that's about it, really.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I see F-35s from Lakenheath and Marham. I'm reasonably close to Marham. I can see them sort of flying in that direction, but they tend to be very high. It's not like 15, 20 years ago when it was all low flying. There are no A-10s over here anymore, and even the
Hmm.
Eagles are high and the Typhoons are high. It's a rare day when something comes down low enough for me to wave at it.
Hmm. Yeah, times have changed, but the world's changed, I suppose.
Well,
That's
yes.
a bit of a reflection.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Okay. So you've been doing your writing for a number of years now.
yeah.
So you will have been in touch, I'm guessing, with a wide variety of aviation people. I mean, not just
Mm,
pilots, but business leaders,
yeah,
designers, engineers,
yeah,
crew, all that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah.
So you've got your finger in the pulse of how the markets are moving. You said you had quite a focus on business aviation.
Mm, sure.
So
Yeah.
the question is, what developments do you see coming over the horizon? But I'll add to that. In the time that you've been doing this, what developments have you seen? What's commonplace today, but would have made your jaw drop when you started?
I'd have to say safety.
Oh.
Safety and how it's achieved. The mechanisms of safety and it's certainly within the best aviation organizations, the constant challenge of is this the best way of doing it? Is there a safer way? Are we doing this as safely as we can now? And if we have had a mistake or an incident, let's go back and take that apart. Let's not point a finger and say, hey, it was your fault. Let's take it apart and say, how can we make sure we don't do that again? Because that could have gone badly wrong.
Mhm.
Um, and that didn't exist in quite the same way 20 years ago.
Right.
I think partly it's because of technology. Technology has helped, but there's also been an opening of attitudes towards let's not place blame or shame. Let's actually work this through and make it better and for everyone. People are very willing to share safety advice with others. So you'll see symposiums where people all come together, operate the same type, and they'll say, "Hey, we had this issue because we'd made this error. Let's help you not to do that."
Mhm.
So for me, that has been almost a game changer. It's been so significant. So safety is the big number one plus for me. Um,
Right.
if we think about business aviation and the future, business aviation has lots of work to do on improving its image because it's very, very easy to give it a kick and say, hey, look, these people are burning dead dinosaurs and don't care.
Mhm.
And that's not true at all. If you're within the industry at all, it's a very, very different impression you get. They're actually sustainability leaders rather than dead dinosaur burners. But that's kind of a whole other story. It has to fix that, and it's working on that. But I think greater and greater fuel efficiency, some alternative propulsion systems for shorter trips as well. But I think we will see business aviation eventually recognized as a sustainability leader and an example to lots of other industries for them to follow.
Mhm. Interesting. Okay. going back to your comments about safety,
Mm,
there's one thing. Some of our work within Swift
mm,
has been within the energy sector and oil and gas and renewables and
yep,
stuff.
sure.
And there's quite often on a big project there'll be a session somewhere either before or afterwards where they'll have a lessons learned
Right.
thing.
Mm,
And at first, when I first heard that phrase, I thought, "Oh, that's great. That's everybody's learning something." And then I got a little bit disillusioned because quite often the lesson was learned, the fault was identified and stuff, but it didn't change the processes. The people still carried on thinking the same way.
mm.
And I can't think of a snappy phrase to replace lessons learned, but there's got to be something following learning the lesson. There has to be an action or a change, otherwise. So I'm assuming that you've found that the lessons have been learned and acted upon in aviation.
Generally so. And those that aren't acted upon will often happen again, and people will get burnt from the same error again.
Mhm.
Um, Something that I especially like, this is something that I learned from working with the RAF, is this idea of mixing younger people with older, more experienced people to get their different perspectives to maintain safety. So younger people will come in with the latest learnings and challenge the senior crew or the senior engineer or whatever and say, "Hey, look, it's moved on. Could we not do it this way? Is there a better way? You've done it like that for 20 years. Is it still the right way to do it?"
Mhm.
So you get that constant to and fro, but it means everyone being empowered to feel they're able to say, "I think I may have seen an issue," or "I think I may know a better way." And that can be difficult for some cultures, I think, for some industry as well.
Yeah, well, I would certainly say that's in a lot of engineering, I would say that's quite a challenging frame of mind
Mm,
from
mm,
my personal experience to see,
sure.
quite often people are very precious about this is the way we've always done it. There's
Yes.
no need to change,
Yeah.
and or you're just trying to change that for the sake of change and just trying to make your mark. Yeah. So well, okay. So that takes us forward then on to really into the next question, which is revolving around STEM/STEAM and young people in the industry itself. So are you saying that, in your opinion, the aviation industry has learned its lessons and is developing good team activities, somewhere where somebody who's young and bright and enthusiastic can make a mark from the word go?
Absolutely. Especially now that we're seeing more and more use of apps, of tablets, and that kind of thing in the cockpit, on the hangar floor, in engineering. You could get someone who's been in the business as an engineer, let's say, for 40 years, and honestly will struggle a little bit with an iPad.
Hmm.
You get someone who comes along, maybe early 20s, they've grown up with it. It's
Hmm.
absolutely fundamentally part of the way they work. And you put the two together and you get something really powerful. I've spoken to people who are instructing on modern turboprop training airplanes. They're instructing young folk in their late teens, early 20s, moving them on for Air Force flying, let's say. And they will sit down and the kids will look at the screens and the instructor will say, "We need whatever navigation screen up." And the kids will scroll straight through it. And the instructor will say, "How did you get there so quickly?" And I say, "Well, we thought you must be able to, so we found a way."
Hmm.
But it's not in the manual. Doesn't matter. It's intuitive. We found it because we knew we could.
Yeah.
But if you've been flying for 30 years, you probably won't think that way. You won't think intuitive. "I bet I can find a better way," because you'll just do it the way the manual says it should be done.
Hmm.
And I hear that quite often where young people will come into the cockpit. And yeah, sure, they don't have the experience. They won't have that airmanship required necessarily. If there's a problem, then the experience is important. But in terms of general operations and working their way through checklists and screens and interpreting data quickly, they're often much better than the experienced pilot or engineer, which is why the combination works so well.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So, on a personal level, have you had much involvement with STEM activities? Do you get your hands dirty and get into schools and colleges and universities and stuff, or does your particular niche keep you operating at the senior levels?
I would say I no, I don't get into schools and universities much as I would like to, but what I do try and do is write things, especially blogs, that young people might be attracted to, or that will encourage other people in the industry to themselves become role models or go out and perform STEM activities and help young people.
Mhm.
And I always think if I can write something and it inspires one young person to consider aviation or even take an aviation job, then that's kind of job done. I just
Mhm.
think that would be such a result. And for me, that's especially been directed to girls and young women because it frustrates me deeply the attitudes that we still see, but also the aviation companies across the spectrum constantly complain that they can't get the young people they need, but still fail to reach half the population most of the time. I
Right.
just find that very bizarre. And I did once challenge a big engineering company that's actually now no longer operating, but they said, oh, we're struggling with recruits. And I said, what about, your latest, I think their latest intake of apprentices was like 32 people, no girls. I said, how is that? How are you not reaching girls? They said, oh, we haven't really tried.
Mm.
Well, wow, shoot yourself in the foot, why don't you?
Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate. So how long ago was that? Just to put that in context.
That was about, it was probably 2 years pre-COVID, so sort of
Right.
five years
Five
ago,
years ago. Yeah.
about 5 or 6 years ago.
I mean, it is a bit shocking, really. I mean, you would think we're now into the 2020s that
Mm.
those attitudes should be fading, and they should be
Yes.
fading fast. It's not all about being trendy or following the fashion of the thing. It's just common sense.
Yeah.
And there's a
Yeah.
long history of women in aviation, which
Yeah.
just seems to be ignored by a significant
Mm.
section. I won't say by everybody because it's not the case, but a significant section of male
Mm.
actors in aviation just
Mm.
ignore the female presence, which surprises me now. It's a bit disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. The prospect of an aviation company of any sort recruiting because it wants to achieve numbers, it wants to achieve, let's say, 40% women, 60% men, and recruiting on that basis is terrifying. It's got to be the right people for the job.
Oh yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you're not reaching everyone to tell them the opportunity, how can you ever possibly get a diverse and full workforce? You just have to make sure that you're ticking the boxes that attract not just women, but all sorts of different people as well, because otherwise you're just not reaching the population.
Yeah, no, quotas should not be necessary. There's
No,
absolutely no logic behind that.
no.
It's just a case of taking the right people for the right job. But to do that,
Yeah.
you have to become you got to advertise in the right places. If people aren't
Yes.
aware of you, then
Yeah.
you're never going to attract them. I mean, I've been banging on about this long enough, and it's the reason for this podcast is to try and get the broad breadth of opportunities within that are linked to aviation. You're an aviation writer. Are you a pilot? Do you fly yourself?
No, I'm appalling.
Yeah.
Absolutely
And
talentless.
this thing, but you are part of the aviation industry,
Well, quite. Yeah.
and that's the thing. And we've been talking to writers, photographers, sorry, I was going to say non-technical. Yeah, I would say non-technical. You're more
Mm.
towards the arts than the sciences, but it's
Yeah.
still part of the industry.
Yeah. Someone very wise who set up his own company that's now really thriving. He said to me, he goes into schools and universities and he says to the kids, what are you interested in? What do you want to do when you leave school? And whatever they say, he always says to them, well, you'll be able to do that in aviation.
Mm.
You know, some of them want to be lawyers. He had one who wanted to be a fashion designer. And he said, yeah, absolutely. Designers, you need uniforms for cabin crew, for flight crew. You need cabins in airliners and business jets. There's loads of scope for fashion and interior designers in aviation. And you can just about find that. And even let's imagine even someone wants to be a baker. There's a lot of high-end catering goes into business jets.
Hmm. Sticking in business aviation though, and looking at STEM activities, my gut, and it's a guess, is that it's harder to get into that arena into the business jet and the business air travel circuit. So you're looking at, small private jets, you're looking at
Yeah.
helicopters, you're looking at obviously the users of these services are towards the higher end of the wage bracket, shall we say?
Sure. Yep.
All right. So just by that aspect alone, it tends to become a little bit more exclusive, a little bit more difficult to get into. If you had somebody from, shall we say, an unprivileged background who
Yep.
has an ambition to get into that area, is it difficult for them to do that? Are there established routes, or do you have to be sponsored, or is it just a case of showcase your talents and so on? What do you think along those lines?
I think it's really a case of think about it reasonably early. Think about what you need in terms of school. Even if what you're doing at school is just awful and you hate it, the end result is a grade on a piece of paper. That gets you to the next stage. You can forget history once you've got the grade and it's got you to the next stage, or whatever that subject is, it doesn't matter. Work that through, get your head around that, get your head around getting what you need to move you forward, and maybe contact some people. If you think, hey, I want to be an aircraft engineer, let's say you really, really want to do business aviation, well, then just look at some of the manufacturers, see where their big service centers are. Email someone and say, hey, how do I come and work for you? Do you have opportunity? Do you have apprenticeships? Do you have days where we can come and visit and just have a look around and see what happens? And just off the top of my head, Gulfstream has a massive facility at Farnborough, Bombardier at Biggin Hill. Biggin Hill has a bunch of other industries around Bombardier that supports it. So these places are out there. They're not that difficult to find. And arguably, because they are, let's say, Bombardier's service facility in the UK is going to be a lot smaller than British Airways.
Mhm.
So arguably, it's going to be easier to find a person who's actually got time to email you back and say, well, you need to do this, or yes, you can visit on this occasion, come along and see what we do. And honestly, I think as soon as you have stood beside any plane, but especially a high performance business jet, you just go, that is so cool. I have to do this again. I have
Mhm.
to keep with this. I very few people get there and want to come away again. Aviation is just so addictive once you've made it.
Yeah.
So I think it's about determination, it's about hard work, self-belief, and just taking those chances and sending out those emails and saying, hey, what do I have to do?
I must admit, from I would say the majority of the interviews that I've carried out for this series, one of the common threads has been showing initiative at an early age,
Mm,
volunteering,
yeah,
putting yourself in the right place, just making that effort, whether it's at your weekends or whatever it is, but it's basically digging your way in, not necessarily down the academic route, although
mm,
that's never going to hurt
no,
having academic qualifications,
yeah,
but just getting in somebody's face and
yeah,
being there,
yeah,
but not necessarily as an aggressive thing, just going on, volunteering, picking up the
yeah,
stuff, cleaning out if there's the crew room, going, can I hang out in the crew room?
yeah,
I'll make the tea. I'll hoover the floors. Oh,
yeah,
well, I'll do the marshalling, or I'll go and wash the planes down or something. You become embedded in the system.
yeah,
I think it's that application and showing initiative. It always impresses because you work your way into the system. I
mm.
think that
I know someone who has an aircraft cleaning business,
right.
and he started as a teenager with a bucket and a sponge cleaning bug squash off the shiny leading edges.
Hmm.
And he would charge a fiver a time to do that. And one of the pilots said, hey, look, I've got some flies on the windscreen. Do that as well. I'll give you a tenner. And he thought, oh, twice the money for not twice the work. That's interesting. So he did the leading edges, but he did a special job because he polished them too. Did the windscreen, got his tenner plus a tip. Interesting. What if I offer to polish the whole airframe or to clean the whole airframe? Then I can charge quite a lot more for that, get some more equipment. Now he has an international business, a fleet of vehicles, couple of hundred people doing cabins and exteriors for some really big name airlines and business aviation as well,
Hmm.
just because he bought himself a bucket and a sponge.
Yeah, I mean, it's you just got to get out there and do it, I guess. It's
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
I'm also fascinated on a little bit about business aviation, because it's not something that I was really, no pun intended, on my radar. I knew the aircraft existed, but you
sure.
never really get to see them or get in them.
Mm,
But it was during COVID when everybody else stopped flying.
yeah,
And if you looked on flight radar or any of the tracking software and looked at what's flying around. Other than military emergency services and freight traffic,
Yeah.
the other things that were flying were business jets. Now, okay, there's a whole political discussion of, well, I guess it's the rich flying around when everybody else is locked in the houses and all the rest of it. That's not what I'm going to get into. But
Sure.
the thing that struck me was how much business jet traffic or business helicopter traffic there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Even transatlantic stuff. I mean,
Mm.
where I am, I'm under the transatlantic flight path. So
Right.
if you head into the States, you go right over my house,
Right.
probably.
Sure.
And the amount of stuff that was moving around, but normally you you would lose it in all the noise when
Mm.
everything else is
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
you strip away all the other stuff, all of a sudden there's all this stuff, and it's like I never realized there were so many Gulfstreams and Falcons
Yeah.
and Learjets and whatever zooming
Yeah.
around the skies. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it
No,
came
absolutely.
as a surprise to me. So somebody's making a lot of money somewhere out of that side of the
Yeah.
industry.
It's an interesting one there in that often the margins for the operators are very slim. So
Mhm,
yes, they do make good money, but they work very, very hard for it.
mhm,
But what business aviation is very good at is moving small numbers of people between airports that you couldn't move between in an airliner
mhm,
and moving them very discreetly and very safely. And when I say safely, I don't necessarily mean from the aviation point of view. I mean from making sure they're safe when they get to the country, that their onward journey in that country is safe.
mhm,
And safe in that case could mean personal protection, but it could also mean safe from COVID regulation or impinging on that regulation or whatever it
mhm,
might be. So that's why business aviation suddenly came to the fore, because a lot of people who absolutely had to travel could only do it by business aviation because the airlines couldn't.
mhm.
And a lot of those people have realized, well, actually, I can fly to places I couldn't before, and that's far more convenient for me. And ultimately, it can cost a little bit less as well sometimes because there's far less transit involved,
Yeah,
much more direct, much quicker. And for a lot of these people, time is as important as money. And if you can save a day by flying business jet and spend that day with your family, that's quite important for a lot of people.
yep, yep. So, so if you were presenting to a bunch of students, say, you know, not yet at university, still at school, but getting towards the end of school,
Yeah.
would you suggest that the business side of aviation is a good place for them to start looking at if they were interested? Doesn't matter what their skill set is, but would you suggest to them that it's worth digging
I
into
would
that
say
area?
absolutely, because a lot of people don't think of it. A lot of people don't understand it.
Mm,
A lot of people think aviation, pilots, engineers, airlines, or military.
mm,
They don't think this whole other side of business aviation. If we widen that out a bit to be more general aviation, there are lots of companies out there flying King Airs, doing aerial survey work, all kinds of stuff. I know someone. She's a doctor in, for want of a better word, trees. That's what her expertise is. But she runs a remote sensing section of an aviation company that goes out and assesses vegetation.
right.
So if you can widen what it is you're thinking about, there are so many opportunities in aviation, and just have a look, see what's possible.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. I would say to anyone, look at business aviation, look at general aviation, and chances are there might be some of it going on quite near you that you never knew about.
Yep. Yep. You hear a noise in the sky and you just ignore, oh, it's another plane. And
Yeah,
yeah, there's so much going on up, a couple of thousand
yeah,
feet above your head.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Time is marching on.
Mm.
So we come round to our big signature question. And I know you've done your homework on this one since you've adopted this question for your own podcasts. So I'm not letting you away with that. But anyway, I'm going to ask you it, and I'm expecting an excellent answer from you. And that is, what's your favorite plane and why?
So, okay, it's a tricky one. So for a start, I didn't know you were asking that question. So that great minds in this case do think alike. So it's a hard one to answer because
Hmm.
normally people will say, "What's your favorite aircraft?" And I'll say, "Well, what type? Do you mean business jet or fighter jet or whatever?" So I'm going to talk a lot and finally come to an answer, which I won't ask you to hold me to tomorrow because I might have changed my mind by then.
Oh, well, it's got to go on the board. It's got to go on
But
the
that's
board. So
fine.
you
That's
have to
fine.
commit. You have to
That's all
commit.
right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll get there eventually. So I've always had a passion for reconnaissance aeroplanes. So
Mhm.
in that, I mean something that started off as something else and then got some windows.
Right.
So things like the Spitfires and the Mosquitoes with cameras in, Meteor FR9, really like the RF-101C Voodoo, the RF-4C Phantom, those types of aeroplane I find fascinating. If we think about fast jets, generally, I think two seats is better than one. Not always. Two-seat Lightning, bit of a travesty, but F104, F16, F15 all look much better with two seats, I feel. Again, controversial. We'll
No,
see
no,
if you get any comments.
I agree with you on that. I think the
Oh,
two-seater Jaguar is
oh,
much
yeah.
more elegant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's good. If we're talking business jets, it would have to be one of the big Gulfstreams because of the shape of those windows. They're wonderful ovals and the undercarriage. And Gulfstream traces heritage back to Grumman. And
Mhm.
I feel that Gulfstream undercarriages still look like they could land on aircraft carriers.
Yep.
So I always like the
I'm with you
Gulfstream.
on that one. Yep.
Good. Okay, right. We like that. Um, but let's wind right back to the very beginning of this podcast when you said to me what got you into aviation. And it might sound like a little bit of a cliche, but it was the Spitfire. And I've been lucky enough to be close to lots of Spitfires in subsequent years, speak to lots of people who fly them, and I've heard them and smelt them and sat in them and done all of that good stuff. So I have to say, the ultimate favorite airplane for me is going to be the Spitfire, but specifically the Mark 8 because
Market.
it was the most perfect and elegant of Spitfires. So there you go.
Okay, right. So not what I was expecting, but a Mark 8 Spitfire. I'll mark
Oh,
that down. I'll make a note of that.
okay. What were you
Um,
expecting?
so I have well, very briefly then I have a question for you. Do you have one of your own pictures of a Mark 8? Because if you have, we can include your picture on the board. If not, we'll go and dig one out from somewhere because
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't.
have one.
I don't think I do, but I'm sure we can find one from somewhere.
Oh yeah, we'll get one. Make sure we get
Yeah,
the copyright and everything sorted out. So
yeah,
a
yeah.
Mark 8 Spitfire.
Mm.
Right. Okay. I shall that will go on our board. Now you will be one of the early pictures on our second picture board because we've moved on
Oh,
to our second picture board now. So
okay.
we've
Right.
just this week just completed or last week we've just completed the first board. And there's quite a variety, so I encourage you to go and have a look on the
Yes, I did have a peek. Yeah.
yeah, so there's quite a variety on there. There's quite a few surprises, and there's also, I think that I'm surprised by the absence of some aircraft from that board. I wasn't expecting such a wide range, and the ones that
Mm.
have been repeated has really surprised me.
Yes, I agree.
So
Yep. Mm.
right. Okay. So the clock's almost up. So Paul Eden, thank you very much for coming on the short circuit, telling us about your involvement with the business side of aviation, your writing. I think, yeah, there was one, the Runway Girl Network. That's
Mm.
one of your, is that
Yeah,
still a valid thing for you?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I write blogs for Runway Girl very often.
Okay, okay. So we'll give a plug to the Runway Girl Network,
Wonderful.
and
Yeah,
we shall speak to you sometime in the not too distant future.
yeah.
Okay,
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
excellent, Paul. Thank you very much for your time, and fly safe.
Thank you.
So that was Paul Eden. It's clear that he fully enjoys and appreciates the business aviation sector, and through his work has gained access and insights into areas that are not usually in the forefront of the public mind. I get the feeling that operating in the business jet part of the sector, one would become much more aware of the sharp end of civil aviation demands, in both terms of engineering and delivery standards. So, thanks to Paul for his insights and sharing his experience. It's always good to learn about new and different areas. And thanks to you for listening. Fly safe. You have been listening to The Short Circuit, presented by Mike McLean and sponsored by Swift Aircraft with the hashtag Inspiring Aviation. This has been a Zoom Spike production.